Forget YouTube this time. All right, so we are now on YouTube. And I am going to share my screen and hopefully you guys can see that.
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody got a hook?
Peter, you're the farther off. How's your internet?
Excellent tonight. Excellent.
Oh, well, let's keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it will stay that way. Let me close the door here. You got your stuff there? Marabou is over there. All right, let's see. We have, I think we have 5 folks online and we have 3, 6, 9 here. So a nice little group. Beads, cone heads. Nobody has those? Okay, don't have those yet. All right. This fly, we call it the hula worm. Don't ask me why, because it kind of looks like a hula skirt if you hold the fly up. But I was looking through worm patterns and thinking about tying a worm pattern this month, and couldn't really find anything other than just a normal like plastic worm clone. And so I saw this fly called a jiggy worm in the Feathercraft catalog, and I couldn't really tell. It has more materials than this, but I really couldn't tell exactly what it was made of, and I couldn't find anything online about it. So I said, well, I'll just make something that looks close to it, and that's what this is. And since it's not actually a jiggy worm, we call it something else. But it only has 3 materials to actually tie in. It has a total of 4 materials, not counting the hook. This is a one-off mustad 90-degree jig hook, but pretty much any 60-degree, those jiggy worms are tied on 60-degree hooks, but in any type of large jig hook will work fine. It's not weighted. This copy on the screen has a large cone head. I sent you all medium cone heads because I was afraid the large wouldn't go through the postage well. And the only other materials, it's just a plain brass. It's not a tungsten. Of course, you could put tungsten cone head. It has Airlines blood quill for the marabou in the front. And blood quill is nice for palmering like we are, because the stem is, you know, it's the stem of the ones we handed out. It's not real stiff, and sometimes marabou is very stiff. And the chenille is mock fly chenille. I tied the first couple of these with just plain woolly booger chenille, but this mock fly chenille is quite a bit larger in diameter. And the nice thing about it, it doesn't unravel when you cut it like normal chenille does. And then the other thing is just whatever your choice and flavor of rubber legs to match. So that's it. The mock fly chenille goes on first, the rubber legs go on next, the marabou, and then slide the cone head over it and tie it all off. So that's pretty much it. The hook, like I say, and the Gamakatsu hook is a much nicer hook than these mustads. These mustads are $14 for 100. Gamakatsu $16 for 25. So we went with these. So yeah, we decided to go with these. And these are 1/0. And let's go ahead and get started. Let's put the hook in the vise. Now, Philip, you're going to help put hook in the vise and all that kind of stuff. And Clyde, if you'll just put it in those jaws and just tighten down the little screw in the front first and the big screw in the back. Not too tight, but just good and snug. Well, you know what? I've already made a mistake. Yep, already made a mistake. We got to put the cone head on first. So slide that on first. All right, now let's get it in the vise. Okay. Now for thread, for mine, I'm using olive 140 denier UTC, but pretty much whatever color matches the color scheme that you're using is fine. And we're going to start the thread just kind of in front of the hook point.
What color thread?
Olive is what I'm using, but you could use brown for this color. You could use black for this color. Black would work fine too. And I'm going to start the thread right in front of the hook point. And I'm going to wrap back to just behind the hook point. Kind of just barely going around the bend of the hook and then snip off that tag in. And then let's make a pretty nice little thread base here. Let's go back up to our tie-in point and then wrap back to right in front of the barb. So I'll wrap back up to the point and then I'll wrap back toward the rear to the barb, and let's let your thread hang there. All right. Now the chenille, I mentioned in the email about using a cigarette lighter. You can see I've tapered the end of this chenille with a cigarette lighter. I'm not going to do that right now. We can taper it after we finish the fly. We can easily burn it then, but just to save time, I'm not going to taper it now. But I sent you or gave you a 1 foot piece of this mock fly chenille. So let's cut it in half to make it a little bit easier to handle. This is enough for 2 flies. Cut it in half. And you notice the chenille is kind of squiggly. Notice that? That it's got a bunch of squiggles on it. Try to put the straightest piece toward the back. Since this is supposed to be a worm fly, we want the straightest piece to be in the back. See, if I put this back there, it would be all crunched up. So let's try to put the straightest piece in the back. So we've got a 6-inch piece in our hand. And the length of this, I like to measure the length of the hook. So I lay the chenille on top of the hook and measure it to the bend. And then I grab the chenille and pull it and stretch out enough more to about reach the hook point or your thread. So I've got almost, but not quite, 2 hook lengths of the chenille. And then I'm a right-handed tyer, so I move my right hand right over my thread, and that's where I'm going to tie in my chenille. And so we're gonna tie that in right over the hook point. So now I'll transfer it to my left hand. And this chenille wants to wrap and roll around the hook on you, so it can be a little aggravating. So take a couple of loose wraps. I have no tension on the thread. A couple of loose wraps right on top of each other, and then pull and put some tension on it, and it won't roll on you. Yep, so a couple of loose wraps and then pull straight up to tighten those down, and it helps keep it from rolling. Now, to further keep it from rolling, let's take several tight wraps right on top of one another, right there. I don't want to move my thread out at all. I have about 5 or 6 wraps all on top of each other, right at that hook point. So make those 5 or 6 wraps, and then take your front piece and pull it back out of the way, and take a couple of wraps, more than a couple, take 4 or 5 wraps right in front of your tie-in point. And that will pretty well secure that chenille to that point on the hook. Good, Cindy? Now, once we're tied in, let's advance our thread forward. And we don't want to go all the way to the bend, because I like to measure my body length with my thread. So we're going to eventually put this cone head in about this position. So I want to wrap my thread. I put my cone head about where it's going to finally be, and I want to wrap my thread to about that point and let it hang right there.
You're not wrapping, cover the whole.
No, yeah, you can spiral it forward. Yeah, you can spiral it forward or wrap it close, whichever you prefer. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is we don't want to crowd this bend, because if we crowd that bend, we're not going to be able to rotate. And when we finish the fly, we're not going to be able to rotate that cone head up into position. So you can see I've stopped quite a ways back, a full cone head length plus some from the bend of the hook. Okay, how are we? Cindy, good? Okay. Clyde, good? Good? Bruce? Philip, we're good back there? Okay, good deal. All right, now let's take that right piece, the right hand, the front piece of our chenille, and let's start wrapping it forward. Now, don't put a lot of tension on it, or it will still twist on the hook shaft. And we want to cover up our thread, so that very first wrap that we take, we want to just go straight over where our thread was. And I like to take my offhand index finger and hold the chenille on the opposite side so I can let go and wrap it. So wrap, hold, wrap, hold, wrap, hold, and work our way all the way forward to our thread point. Like touching wraps of that chenille all the way forward until you get to your thread. Yep, don't crowd the front. And when you get to your thread, just hold your chenille up at a slight angle. And I'm gonna pause here for just a second, let everybody get wrapped forward. Okay. Now, with that chenille at a slight angle forward, I can bring my thread over the top of that chenille. Let's do that 3 times to bind it down.
Done that.
What's that, John?
Said I've already done that.
Okay, all right. Well, so you need to zoom these out from your house and teach them, John. All right, so I've done those 3 wraps. Now let's pull that chenille back to the rear and make 3 or 4 wraps in front of that tie-in point. And trim off our tag end of chenille. Hopefully we don't cut our thread at the same time. And then bind down that front section of chenille. Just take 8 or 10 thread wraps there just to get it down.
So you wrap your chenille, I broke my thread, I was having to
Okay.
but how many wraps to get up?
I don't know, I just wrapped to the thread point, Ronnie. I didn't
Okay, so
count.
you just,
Yes, wrapping to the thread point, stopping there. You don't want to crowd that eye. You want to make sure you see when I move my cone head, I've still got, you can see I've still got quite a bit of space there. Yeah.
So you cut off the extra length.
Cut off the extra length of the chenille.
after you tie it in.
Now, notice that I've bound down the front of the chenille. I've got a little thread base there. I've given it probably a dozen wraps of thread right on the front edge of that chenille. Whoops. Lost focus, y'all. Give me just a second.
Put out of focus.
Lose my focus here.
Okay, that's material number 1. 2 more to go. Second material is whatever flavor of rubber leg. I sent you guys in the mail some, and then whatever Jim handed out here. Notice these rubber legs are connected together on each end. Try not to split that connection at this point. But what we want to pick is we want to pick 3 legs out of this. So I've grabbed those first 3 and then just pull it and see they stay connected on each end. It makes them much easier to handle that way. So I pull it and I have 3 legs.
They'll end up with not enough. I got some.
Three.
This is possible.
Yep. So get 3 legs in hand. There's any number of ways you can tie these legs in. I'm going to tie them in right on top of that little thread base, that little small thread base, and they right up against the chenille. And the way I like to do it is I like to wrap the rubber legs around my thread, just like that. Again, there's any number of ways you can do this. But I've wrapped, and I have half on each side. Try to keep those ends almost even. It doesn't matter that it's exactly even. We're going to trim them off at the end. But then stretching the leg slightly and holding my bobbin in my right hand, I let those legs slide down to the top of the hook. I want to tie these on top of the fly. You can see I have them laying. I'm going to turn my vise so you can see. And I'm tying those right on top. Now let me zoom in on that little tie-in point. And see, I'm tying in just that first little bit. And that's our first set of legs. Now, if you have a little hair clip or a piece of, my hair's getting long, I wore one, so I've got mine, or a piece of soda straw here, you can clip these legs out of the way. And I'm going to do that just to keep the camera clean. Clip those out of the way. Okay, y'all out on Zoom, is the video still coming through okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, if you have a rotary vise, rotate upside down. If you don't have a rotary vise, take the hook out and turn it upside down, because we're going to tie 3 more legs on the bottom, just like we tied these 3 in. So I go to my leg, and again, I pull off 3. I didn't quite keep them together like I should here, but that's okay. Wrap them around the thread, roughly to the middle. And just like we did before, hold the legs in your material hand and slightly stretch them and tie them on the bottom side of the hook. Notice I'm tying back toward my chenille. I'm trying not to tie very far forward here, because we still have to tie marabou in. All right, and I'm going to take my little hair clip and clip those in place. And once you get those bottom legs tied in, you can rotate your hook back or move it back to the upright position. And the next material we're going to tie in is, and the last material we're going to tie in is the marabou. And I'm using blood quills here because when you palmer, that is, when we say palmer, that means wrapping the marabou around the hook shank. There's a couple of things you want. You don't want the stem to be really, really stiff, because if the stem is stiff like it is at the base, it obviously won't wrap. And you also want it to have a fairly well-defined center stem like this that you can tie in. And some marabou, like the woolly booger marabou or just the standard marabou, has a much thicker stem than these blood quills. So if you can find the blood quills, they're much better for this type of tie. Yep. All right. Now, we don't want all this marabou, so let's I'm going to look at my marabou and I see that along here, my stem starts to get pretty thick. So I'm going to strip everything off from that point down and get rid of it so it won't be in my way. And you'll just have to look at your feather. You really only need about an inch or a little more than an inch of marabou feathers to wrap. So you don't have to have a lot left. You can see I don't have a whole lot left here, which is fine. Strip it yeah, strip. You can see Cindy, on this, I've stripped all the marabou from the thick part of the stem. Yep, I've just pulled it straight down.
And how long should it be?
Well, you only need really about an inch because I'm going to actually tie it in about, that's a good question, Bruce. I'm going to tie it in about this point, and I only need about an inch. So that's an inch and a quarter. It's not critical, you know, but you need a good inch that you can wrap. Now, to tie this in, notice that the stem has a bend to it. It has a concave side and it has a convex side to it. We want to tie it in, and we're going to tie it in by the tip. So we're going to tie it in by these feathers, but we want that concave side to be facing toward the hook shank. So to find that tie-in point, I'm just going to kind of look up, pull down on the feathers a little bit, hold the top. And we don't want to tie way up here because that'll break. It'll break instantly. So we're going to tie it in down in here, kind of well down into the feather. And what I'm going to do is just pull those long feathers back and pull those tip feathers forward. And I'm just going to lay that marabou first. I want to make sure my thread is back against the chenille here. So lay that marabou just across the hook shank, right in, and we're going to take a wrap right in front of those legs, just like that. Boom. About 3 wraps. 3 wraps should be plenty. And then this tip piece, I'm going to pull back to the rear and take a couple of wraps over it.
You said the point, pushing forward.
Pull it back. Yes, we're going to, it's called reverse tie, Ronnie. We're going to pull it back and take a couple of wraps over it. And we're going to leave it on there because it's some nice feather on that tip. So once I have it tied in, then I can wrap my thread forward to just in front of that little hump I tied the legs on. Now let me zoom in here again. Notice that I tied in that marabou on top of where I tied in my legs. I'm not moving forward toward the hook bend at all. I tied it in right there in front of my legs. And then I move my thread to just in front of that little tie-in point and let it hang there. And we are almost there. Now this is the fun part, to keep this from tangling. And don't pull too hard because it still will break. It's not very, let me zoom out. Oops, sorry about that, guys. It still will break. So gently sweep the feathers back and take a wrap. Now what I like to do is hold it down and notice how it kind of tangles underneath the hook shanks. I want to reach in and pick those out too. Yep. And then I'm going to pull them back one more time and make my next wrap. And again, reach underneath pull them back.
Are you wrapping towards the helm?
I'm wrapping I'm trying to keep the wraps as close together as I can
Okay.
to keep from going as far forward. Now, so far I've made 3 wraps. And again, see how it tangles when I get under the hook? So just reach under there and just pull all that out. Do what, Jim?
No, I said, you're a good instructor. I said, I just rap, and I don't know how to rap.
Now, I think that's about enough marabou. So what I'm going to do, I could tie down on top of that, but I like it to be a little neater. So I'm going to strip some of that excess off. I don't want to wrap anymore. So I'm going to strip some of that excess off while I'm wrapping here. Just don't pull too much at a time because you don't want to break the fiber. Because when I tie it in, I like to tie in on that bare feather shaft. So I have that bare shaft sticking straight up. And then just like, or stem, not shaft, stem, just like we did the chenille, take a couple of wraps over that. Now, this is really important for tying in marabou. If I were to cut this right now, even though it's got a couple of wraps of thread, it would come loose. So we want to take this stem and pull it back. I got to sweep all those fibers back out of the way too. And let me zoom in, and I want to do a reverse tie over that. I want that thread to get on, and it'll want to slide on you. I want to tie over that stem, holding that stem back, and then I can cut it off. And let me zoom back out so you can actually see what I'm doing. And it looks like a mess right now, but we're going to clean it up a little bit. Actually, probably fish pretty good right now. Now, whatever your choice of finishing, I'm going to whip finish right behind, or actually right in front of my tying point.
Before you do that, what did you do with the big piece of the feather?
The stem, I bent it back.
Bend it back.
And wrapped over that bent back piece slightly. Did a little reverse tie on it, so it just kind of doubles down on making sure it doesn't come loose. Because that stem is real slick and it'll slide out from under that thread. So if you want to whip finish here, if you half hitch, whatever your finish of choice is, I'm just going to do just a quick whip finish. It doesn't matter if your thread gets in your, or if your marabou gets in your thread, and go ahead and cut your thread off. Now we'll find out if I crowded my hook bend too much here. Because if you get it too close, it's really tough to push that cone head up on it. So once you snip your thread off, just kind of work that cone head. Actually, that one went up pretty good. Work it up around the bend. And I'm going to employ my little hair clip one more time. Walmart has these little hair clips. They're like a dozen for $3. So they're really good little, for those of us who don't normally use hair clips, they're good little fly tying tools.
I had about 20 of them. I think give everyone away up here.
Mm-hmm.
Got one left.
Also, these large soda straws, this is a cut piece of soda straw, works well. This just has a slit cut in it. Just the large ones. I just leave it. They're on my vise, so I always have it. Now, once we have our cone up and over and against our marabou, we want to start our thread. And this takes a little finger gymnastics. While you're holding your cone head back and holding your thread, start that thread right in front of the cone head. And then once you make 8 or 10 wraps, go ahead and trim that tag end off. And then you just keep wrapping right up against the cone head. Matter of fact, I'm actually like, it's almost as if I'm trying to wrap my thread over the front of the cone head. And I just wrap. Yes, sir. Is that you, John?
That was me, broke a thread.
Broke a thread. And you keep wrapping. You want to make sure that you wrap enough, a large enough piece, and it can slip like mine did. A large enough piece that, or a large enough thread dam that will hold that cone head back. And then once you have that, go ahead and whip finish again, or hat hitch again, whichever you prefer.
So how did you get that in front of your bead?
I started my thread again.
Oh, you started it.
Yep. And except for a little trim work, we're about done. All right, I'm going to pause here before the trim, let everybody catch up on the second thread wrap.
Good enough. Good enough.
Yeah, just make sure you build enough thread where that cone head won't slip forward. And then of course I'm not going to on the camera here, but you would want to put a drop or two of head cement or UV cure resin at the front to make sure it doesn't come unraveled. Good out there? Tom, Mark, Peter, good?
Well, I built up the thread head too close to the eye. I could not get the cone head up and over.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do then, Peter, with the cone head down, take like the back of your scissors and just shove your material back down the hook shank a little bit if you can.
Oh yeah.
And and sometimes you really have to force it, and it has to kind of break over that material in the front.
Yeah.
Okay, now to trim this, the marabou is quite a bit too long. Now you could leave it like that, but it really needs to be a little shorter. So I'm just going to kind of preen it all forward. Actually, I'm going to stand up and blow on the back of my fly to get all that marabou forward. Make sure I don't have a leg wrapped in there. Now I've got this long piece of marabou that I would really like for it to be about the length of the hook shaft, the hook shank. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I don't have much of a fingernail, but if you have fingernails, hold the marabou in my case, my left hand, and start just breaking it off, pinching and breaking it off until you get it about where you want it. And if you don't have fingernails to do it with, take the back of your scissors and you can do the same thing. And I want that yet a little bit shorter. And you don't want to cut it because, of course, then it would look cut,
yeah,
a little artificial. And that's probably about right. That may still be a little long, but no, that's about right. Whatever length suits you, I'm going to shorten that up just a little bit more. shorten that up about another 1/4 of an inch here.
I broke my thread right up when I was wrapping.
Okay, yep, there we go. Now, the only thing left remaining to trim would be our legs, and we'll just take those and just pull them to the rear. And I want them not quite as long as my tail. So I want them longer than my marabou, but not quite as long as my tail. So I'm going to trim them about a 1/2 inch shorter than my tail. And there we have it. The most difficult thing about this, there's 2 points. One is crowding that hook bend, and the other is just the marabou, wrapping the marabou where it doesn't lay over itself too badly. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and I have a cigarette lighter here, and I'm going to go ahead and taper this. I say I have a cigarette lighter. I do. If you leave it there too long, and just kind of pinch it a little bit, and that's pretty much it. Peter, did you get your cone up and over?
No, it doesn't look quite perfect to me, but I think the fish will still go for it.
There you go. It has really good action in the water. That marabou really undulates, and that those legs flow. Now,
Yeah.
the sink rate with this medium cone head, it doesn't sink very fast. So this would be good for fishing over like weed beds, grass beds.
Yeah.
If you want to get deeper, you want to add a large cone head and maybe even a few wraps of lead wire.
Yeah, this looks awesome.
Yeah, it should be. I haven't fished it yet, but I can't help but believe it would be a good one. Flip says it will be, and I believe Flip. So he's.
Yeah. I'm sure.
All right. Do you want to tie a second copy?
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. I will. Folks here in the room, do you want to tie a second copy? Copy number 2. It's only 7:00. We only tied. It took about a half hour. So.
Do the trim part one more time.
Okay, run through the trim. The marabou or the legs?
The marabou.
The marabou. Okay. Now
The chenille, the feathers.
the feathers of marabou.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can trim that.
Bring it forward.
Forward.
Yep.
Separate the legs.
Separate the legs, and if you want to blow on the back of it, and you can grab that marabou, and then I've seen Brian Wise do that, so I stole that little technique from him. And you bring it forward, and then use either the back of your scissors or your thumb or fingernail, and just tear it off to about the same length as the hook shank.
Okay.
And then your legs are about a 1/2 inch shorter than the tail. Yep. Okay. Copy number 2. Let me see if I have materials for copy number 2. I do. All right, this time I'm going to remember to put the cone head on. Get that hook well secured. Yeah, let's make another one. And again, we want to start our thread right in front of that hook point, anywhere in the middle, it doesn't matter. It's not critical. Just start it somewhere around the hook point and go back to the barb or a little bit farther. And then back forward again in front of the hook point, and then back to the barb. So want a nice thick thread base there for that. Helps keep that chenille from spinning on us. All right. We have a thread base and we have thread hanging at roughly the hook board. Now, again, to measure the length of the chenille that we tie in first, I measure a full hook shank in length, and then I pull it back to about the hook point. So I have about 1 2/3 of a hook shank. Bring that back to our thread. Transfer it to the left hand. Remember, we take a couple of loose wraps with no thread tension. And then pull up. Keep it from rotating. And then take 4 or 5 tight wraps, one on top of the other. Okay. And then we take that front tag in and pull it back and take 4 or 5 wraps in front of it. And then advance our thread, and it can be in wide spiral wraps. That doesn't have to be touching. Again, make sure we leave plenty of space there. And I like to put the cone there. And so I have my thread at the back of the cone, and I still have a little space in the front of the cone. So that should be about right. Zoom in on that so you can see that space I've left there. A good 1/4 of an inch behind the hook bend. Bruce, you have materials? You're going to tie the other one later. Did I give you materials for 2? Oh, okay. Okay, good.
I just got lost on just.
Okay. Well, I didn't forget the video this time, so it'll be on YouTube. So the video will be up there. All right, so let's wrap that tag in again. Right, take that first wrap right over our thread so it covers it up, and then just get that cone out of the way, and then wrap forward all the way. I didn't quite get my thread covered. Hang on. Quite cover my thread up. Let me go back. There we go. Let's make those tight touching wraps all the way forward to the thread. And when your chenille like mine, when it touches the thread, stop on that wrap. Yeah, make sure that space stays there. Don't take that extra wrap. Hold the chenille forward at an angle and take about 3 thread wraps over the top of it. Transfer the chenille to your left hand, tighten down on those, pull it back, and 3 or 4 in front. You know, you could probably wrap this to the cone head and just put the cone head on it and fish it just like that, like a plastic worm. Mm-hmm. All right, trim. And let's take 4 or 5 thread wraps right in front of the chenille. So I have that little thread base right there. I've lost my light. Okay, now legs, just like we did before, let's grab 3 strands, trying to keep those ends still attached. 3 strands.
You have to go with 2 and 3.
You need some more legs, right?
I must have 11 and it was once it said 12.
So wrap it around halfway. And again, I like to stretch that leg in those legs in my left hand. Let me turn my vise so you can see it. I'm tying them right on top of the hook. So I'm wrapping back kind of almost into my chenille a little bit. And I get my hair clip. Rotate the vise or take your hook out and turn it in the vise. And we'll tie those other 3 on the bottom, the other 3 legs, just like we did those. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you get 4 or you put 2, I don't think it matters. As long as you have a few legs top and a few on the bottom. Get those ends roughly even. And again, notice I'm taking those wraps over that rubber leg material back into that chenille. And turn my hook back over. And you can kind of massage them around the hook shank if you like. Okay. Now marabou time again. Let's pull all those feathers from the thick part of the stem. Again, I'm going to tie that tip in by around here, so I probably don't need quite. I have about a 3-inch piece of marabou, but again, I'm going to tie that in 1.5 inches or so down, maybe 2.5-inch piece. And remember, it has that concave side, and we want that concave side facing down to the hook. It's like that. So I grab the tip of the marabou and just pull those long fibers back just to kind of expose a little section there that I can lay across the hook. And all I need is a couple of wraps. Take that tip, pull it back. Come on, cone head, get out of the way. Okay. And now I'm tied in. And I'll pause there to everybody gets caught up.
Are you tying your marabou on top of the chenille or on?
I'm tied it on top of the same tying point I tied my legs in.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep all that material tied on in that one spot, so I don't crowd that at the end of the hook. Flip, you have your 2 tied already?
Just getting through, Bill.
Okay, good. All right, let's start. We tied in. Just a second. Okay, so now we hold our feather up and that concave side we had is facing the rear. And I just sweep all this stuff back. And if it twists on you, it's no big deal. Sweep all of it back, make a turn with it. And again, see, it wants to clump up under the hook. So I grab it under, come to the top, sweep back. Luck it out from under. And I'm on my fourth wrap. I'm gonna make a few more because this is a pretty thin piece of marabou that I have. And like I did before, let's see, I'm gonna take another wrap. Let's see. And just like I did before, I'm going to strip that excess marabou off my stem so I can tie in right by the bare stem. So now I have bare stem to tie in. Couple of wraps behind. And I'll pause here for just a second before I do that reverse tie on the stem. Get one time. Cool. Live, it did good there. That's good. Okay. All right. So tie that. I'm at the point I've wrapped a couple of wraps of thread behind my stem. I'm going to pull that stem back, everything else with it, and take a couple of wraps over the top of that bare stem pointing back. And that'll really cinch that in. And then I trim that stem tag off. You can see I've got just a small area, and I'm going to whip finish right there on top of that same thread. All right, and once I've whip finished, I take that cone and push it back. There. I did a little better on this one because I have a little flat, little horizontal shaft left there, so that makes it easier to wrap that next thread wrap. Jeff, good. Yeah, go ahead and push the cone head back up over you, mate. Yeah, cut your thread, yeah. Yep. Now hold the cone head back and start thread in front of the cone head, right up against it. And unlike my first copy, I have this nice little piece of hook shank there, hook shaft that I can tie on, and I don't have to hold it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll push it back.
Yeah, I had showed it.
And just keep wrapping, keep wrapping. And occasionally push forward, so I don't have enough. Occasionally push the cone forward until it. Okay, now I'm good. My cone head won't go forward anymore, so I can whip finish here. Five-turn whip finish.
You just gotta keep pulling when it gets to become a strip says you can't come up with a rod.
Yeah.
It might work sometimes.
Okay, get my hair clip out of the way, and I want to, this marabou's pretty thin. Like I said, that was a thin piece of marabou, but I'm going to shorten it just a bit anyway. Hold my legs back out of the way and pull the marabou forward. Yeah, this is a real thin piece of marabou. I should have added a little more to it. And tear it until it's about the length of the hook shank. And then we want our legs, again, about a ½ inch shorter than the tail. So I'll pull the legs and the tail out together and about a ½ inch shorter. Oops. One little stray leg there. And take my cigarette lighter, taper my tail. Hopefully the smoke alarm won't go off. There we go. And we're done. Anybody catches fish on this, you need to post it on the club Facebook page so we can see. I think so. Let's see. I mean, yeah, Peter always posts pictures of all the fish he catches with our flies. I love it.
Not lately, but I will again.
Do what?
Not lately, but hopefully soon enough.
Yeah, add a little head cement to that.
Oh, thread.
Much better.
It does, yeah. That's why the 140 denier is much better. If you had 70 denier, you'd take 100 wraps to, maybe not, but I mean, it'd take a lot of wraps to block it. All right.